March 23, 1945, 2100 hours. The west bank of the Rhine, near Wesel, Germany. Oberst Wilhelm Steilberg, a veteran officer, surveyed the dark, formidable expanse of water, his gaze unwavering. For 2 millennia, this river, the Rhine, had stood as Germany's natural bastion, a sacred boundary, a defiant sentinel against invasion. His confidence and that of the Wehrmacht rested upon its unyielding current. The strategic doctrine was clear, forged by centuries of conflict. The Rhine, a 700-mile barrier, averaging 1,500 feet wide, with a swift, treacherous current, could only be crossed at fixed points. Bridges, or meticulously planned large-scale amphibious assaults. Both inherently slow, vulnerable, and predictable. German intelligence, though increasingly fragmented, confirmed no such preparation could escape their notice. This was not merely a physical obstacle, but a psychological bulwark. For the battered German forces, pushed relentlessly back across the Western Front, the Rhine represented their final, impenetrable line of defense. Beyond it lay the industrial heartland, the very soul of the Reich. They believed, with every fiber of their being, that here, at this ancient river, the Allied advance would, at last, be stalled. By March 23, 1945, a profound sense of grim determination had settled over the German defenders along the Rhine. From Nijmegen in the north down to Strasbourg in the south, the Wehrmacht had meticulously, if desperately, prepared. Field Marshal Walter Model's Army Group B and Army Group H to the north constituted the primary bulwark. Their orders were explicit: hold the line at all costs. For 2 millennia, the Rhine had served as a natural frontier, a formidable barrier against invaders. At an average width of 300 meters and a swift, treacherous current, it was considered a near impassable obstacle, especially without sophisticated bridging equipment. German military doctrine, steeped in centuries of European warfare, dictated that any major crossing would be a slow, vulnerable affair, requiring pontoon bridges or captured fixed structures. These choke points, they believed, would be easily annihilated by concentrated artillery and air power. Their defensive strategy was anchored in this conviction. Every potential crossing point was heavily fortified. Thousands of mines, both anti-tank and anti-personnel, littered the approaches. Well-sighted machine gun nests and formidable concentrations of 88mm anti-aircraft guns, repurposed for ground combat, formed an interlocking fire curtain. Beyond this, the Rhine protected the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland, vital for any continued war effort. Its loss would signal the end. The German High Command, despite intelligence reports of Allied logistical innovations, remained fixated on traditional amphibious operations. They anticipated a grinding, attritional battle for every inch of the riverbank, giving them precious days, perhaps weeks, to regroup and counterattack. The psychological impact of holding this sacred river, the Rheinwacht, was immense for the morale of the dwindling German forces. This unshakable confidence in the Rhine's natural and doctrinal impregnability would prove to be their most critical miscalculation. Oberst Wilhelm Steilberg, a veteran NCO of the Wehrmacht, stood vigil on the west bank of the Rhine that fateful evening, March 23, 1945. His gaze swept across the darkening river, observing the distant, yet unmistakable, Allied buildup on the eastern shore. For Steilberg, and for countless German soldiers, this river was more than a geographical feature. It was a fortress, a liquid bulwark, etched into 2 millennia of German military doctrine. He had witnessed the relentless Allied advance, the crumbling of the Ardennes salient, yet here, at the Rhine, an almost primal confidence resonated within him. The river's formidable width, its swift currents, the sheer scale of engineering required for any conventional crossing, these were immutable facts. German intelligence, though increasingly fragmented, had meticulously catalogued the Allied force concentrations, the artillery parks, the supply depots. Yet, the nature of the crossing remained in their assessment rigidly predictable. Steinberg, like his commanders, understood that bridging the Rhine under sustained fire was a monumental undertaking. Such an effort would demand time, precision, and expose any crossing point to devastating counterattacks. He saw, or believed he saw, only the conventional indicators of such an assault. The subtle cues, the very absence of traditional pontoon bridge components, the unprecedented scale of what appeared to be mere trucks massing on the opposite bank. These vital discrepancies remained unseen or critically misinterpreted by the entrenched German military mind. His confidence, rooted deeply in history and conventional wisdom, was about to collide with an entirely new paradigm of warfare.
Despite its formidable Reputation, deutsche Intelligenz, known for its metikulöse Analyse, harberte eine crucielle Blindspot. Der strategische Fokus remained fixiert auf konventionelle Bridge-Building-Operationen und established Crossing-Punkte, eine Doktrin hohnt über Jahrhunderte von europäischen Warkrieg. Dies rigide Anhalten zu historischem Präzedent erschürte einen Threat, already manifestieren in plain sight. Der DUKW, dies amphibische Workhorse, hatte made appearances in Allied Logistics Chains für mehrere Monate. Von den Beaches von Sizilien in 1943, wo es Utility in Offloading Cargo wurde noted, zu den kritischen Normandy Beachheads in 1944, diese distinktive Vehikel wurden observiert. Yet reports filtering back zu dem deutschen High Command von Reconnaissance Units und interpretiert von Capture-Dokumenten Konsistenz downplayte der strategische Wert. Für Large-Scale Riverine Assault, der wurde kategorisiert mehrlich als spezialisierte Supply Trucks, useful für Coastal-Operationen oder navigieren shallower Marshlands. Die Idee von diesen mehr Trucks, serving als der primäre Speerherd für breaching eine Major Artery, like die Rhine, war simplich nicht konzidiert. Dies kollektive Misszugang, ein profundes Fehler von taktischer Vorsicht, ließ die deutschen westlichen Defensen entspalt. Deren Defense Blueprints wurden bereits um Annahmen von fixen Bridgeheads oder vulnerablen Pontonstrukturen. Die Kapazität von Tausenden von diesen schwimmenden Vehikeln zu bypassen traditionelle Chokepoints und deliver Troops direkt an Shore along einer Vast Front lag komplett außerhalb ihrer strategischen Imagination. Dies Oversight, eine grave Misskalkulation von Allied industrieller Kapazität und innovativer taktischer Tanking, wird profound kostlich, strippen die Rhine von es perceivte strategische Signifikanz als ein unüberwindbarer Barriere.
While German strategists clung to the established doctrines of riverine defense, their American counterparts, driven by the stark realities of global conflict, were embracing an entirely different philosophy. The genesis of their crucial counter-argument, the DUKW, lay not in grand strategic planning, but in a seemingly minor yet profoundly impactful maritime incident. In 1942, off the treacherous coast of Cape Cod, a U.S. Coast Guard vessel ran aground. The ensuing struggle to transfer vital cargo from ship to shore highlighted a critical logistical choke point. This practical problem, observed by civilian engineer Ned Hine from the Chief of Naval Operations Bureau of Ships, sparked an immediate and highly pragmatic response. The need was clear: a vehicle capable of navigating both water and land seamlessly. General Motors Corporation, specifically its Yellow Truck and Coach Manufacturing Company division, was tasked with this urgent development. Collaborating with the esteemed naval architect Sparkman and Steffens, particularly Rod Steffens, a design rapidly materialized. It cleverly married the robust chassis and drivetrain of the proven GMC CCW 6x6 truck with a newly designed watertight hull. This fusion of military utility and marine engineering was executed with astonishing speed. From initial concept to the operational prototype, the entire process took barely 90 days. It was a testament to America's industrial might and its unyielding focus on practical solutions to immediate operational requirements. The DUKW, a utilitarian brute, was born, ready to bridge the perilous gap between sea and land. GMC's vast industrial complexes hummed with purpose. Between 1942 and 1945, an extraordinary 21,147 DUKW amphibious trucks were manufactured, a testament to America's unmatched production capacity. This was not merely about numbers, it was a strategic choice to overwhelm the enemy through sheer logistical volume. German war production, while capable of engineering marvels like the Tiger I tank or the advanced Me-262 jet fighter, was often characterized by smaller batch sizes and intricate, time-consuming craftsmanship. Their industrial base, though sophisticated, could not match the Allied output of standardized, rugged equipment designed for rapid deployment and ease of maintenance. The DUKW became the embodiment of this industrial asymmetry. Its widespread availability allowed Allied planners to rethink conventional amphibious doctrine, to plan crossings not just at fortified points but across vast riverine fronts. This relentless flow of essential supplies and personnel was the true engine behind the Allied advance, a stark counterpoint to the increasingly strained German logistics. The Duke's revolutionary capabilities demanded a new breed of soldier. Recognizing this, Allied command initiated an intensive, unprecedented training regimen, far from the Rhine. Throughout late 1944 and early 1945, particularly along the meandering Maas River in the Netherlands, thousands of American and British troops were rigorously drilled. They practiced the precise art of amphibious assault, learning to transition seamlessly from land to water, navigating challenging currents, and maintaining tight formations under simulated combat conditions. These were not mere drivers, they were becoming riverine specialists. Combat experience, notably from the logistical demands of the Normandy landings, had already provided invaluable lessons. Commanders observed the Duke's performance firsthand, identifying areas for enhancement. This feedback led to critical modifications: strengthened suspension systems for heavy loads over rough terrain, improved bilge pumps to manage water intake, and reinforced cargo beds for increased durability. These were not theoretical upgrades, but practical evolutions born from the crucible of battle. Specialized amphibious truck companies were formally constituted, their crews meticulously trained not just in driving, but in precise coordination for mass crossings. They mastered the complex choreography of unloading supplies directly onto the beachhead, evacuating casualties efficiently, and operating under enemy fire. By March 1945, these units, tempered by relentless training and battle-tested improvements, represented a formidable, mobile logistical arm, ready to confront the Rhine's formidable currents and shatter 2 millennia of German strategic doctrine.
As twilight deepened, on March 23, 1945, the western bank of the Rhine fell silent, a tense, expectant silence. Then, precisely at 9 p.m., a cacophony erupted. Over 3,000 Allied artillery pieces, from 155mm long toms to 240mm howitzers, unleashed a thunderous preparatory bombardment, an inferno of steel and high explosives, directly onto the German defensive positions across the river. It was an earth-shattering symphony, designed to pulverize fortifications and shatter the morale of the defenders. This coordinated deluge of fire, stretching for miles along the riverfront, served multiple critical objectives. Primarily, it aimed to suppress any organized German resistance, to neutralize their strong points, and disrupt their lines of communication. But beneath this curtain of fire, its true strategic purpose unfolded. The sheer volume, the relentless intensity, was designed to mask the exact nature and the precise locations of the main assault crossings. German intelligence, preoccupied with traditional bridging operations, would struggle to discern the true threat emerging from the maelstrom. Amidst this apocalyptic barrage, the leading elements of the British 33 Corps, specifically the veteran 51st Highland Division, began their perilous journey. Their assault craft, primarily traditional storm boats and small landing craft, were launched into the churning waters under the protective umbrella of the artillery.
Their immediate objective, to establish forward bridgeheads, to secure beachheads on the eastern bank, and clear the way for follow-on forces. This initial thrust, a brutal direct confrontation, was critical in drawing German attention away from the subtly unfolding logistical marvel that would soon redefine riverine warfare. The German defensive positions along the Rhine, near Wesel, had braced for the inevitable Allied crossing. Their doctrine, honed over centuries, dictated that a major river assault would necessitate the construction of bridges, the deployment of ferries, or the seizure of existing crossing points. Intelligence, though flawed, had focused on these conventional vulnerabilities. But on the night of March 23, 1945, as the intense Allied artillery bombardment began to lift, a profoundly unsettling sight emerged from the churned dark waters. German observers, peering through the gloom and haze, initially struggled to comprehend. Oust Wilhelm Steinberg, commanding a small contingent near the river's edge, watched with growing disbelief. He had expected rafts, perhaps assault boats, or the laborious construction of pontoon spans under fire. Instead, strange olive-drab vehicles, clearly trucks, were not merely navigating the currents. They were, inexplicably, driving out of the Rhine. "Schwimmende Lastwagen," the cry went up. "Swimming trucks." These were not conventional vessels unloading cargo at a designated beachhead. These were trucks laden with troops and supplies motoring directly from the river onto the muddy banks, bypassing all established obstacles, ignoring the very concept of a fixed crossing point. This was an immediate, visceral challenge to every tenet of German riverine defense. For 2 millennia, the Rhine had stood as a formidable barrier, its crossing a monumental feat of engineering and combat. Now, it was being traversed, not by engineers, but by transport vehicles, rendering centuries of strategic thinking instantly obsolete. The shock was profound. It wasn't just a tactical surprise, it was a complete doctrinal invalidation. The psychological impact on the defenders, witnessing these amphibious behemoths effortlessly breach their impenetrable natural fortress, was devastating. The river, their final bulwark, had been rendered industrially irrelevant. The importance of it was profound. The DUKW's true genius lay not merely in its ability to float, but in its seamless transition from water to land. Unlike traditional river crossings, which demanded the establishment of vulnerable bridgeheads, or the construction of slow, exposed pontoon bridges, the DUKW simply drove. Loaded with combat troops, ammunition, or critical supplies, these 6-wheeled amphibians would power through the Rhine's swift currents, and without hesitation ascend a muddy, cratered banks. They bypassed with contemptuous ease the meticulously prepared German strongpoints, the fortified observation posts, the pre-sighted machine gun nests, all designed to obliterate any conventional assault force attempting to consolidate on a narrow beachhead. This capability fundamentally undermines centuries of riverine defense doctrine. German planners, rooted in a tradition stretching back to Roman times, had always conceived of river crossings as fixed points, bottlenecks where an enemy could be concentrated and destroyed. The DUKW eliminated the bottleneck. It transformed the entire riverbank into a potential landing zone. For the Wehrmacht soldiers, huddled in their defensive positions, it was an unfathomable sight. Their prepared fields of fire, the very geography they had chosen to defend, became irrelevant. "They come ashore everywhere," reported one bewildered German officer near Walsum, his voice laced with incredulity. "The trucks just swim onto the land." This widespread, decentralized assault shattered any hope of containing the invasion. The psychological toll was immense. German commanders, trained to defend specific crossing points and repel linear assaults, found their entire tactical framework dissolving. There was no single point of attack to counter, no concentrated force to target with counter-battery fire. The enemy was simply everywhere. The very river, once their staunch ally, had become a highway for their undoing. However, even the DUKW, for all its revolutionary impact, was not without its vulnerabilities. Its top speed on land was modest, and its unarmored hull offered little protection against direct artillery hits or anti-tank fire. German forces, though caught off guard, did attempt to engage these amphibious vehicles. Yet their fragmented command structure and the sheer overwhelming scale of the Allied crossing operation, with hundreds of DUKWs operating simultaneously across a wide front, meant that individual successes against the swimming trucks were negligible in the face of the larger, unstoppable tide. The practical effect was immediate and catastrophic for German resistance. Troops and equipment were offloaded directly into the fighting, often kilometers inland, reducing the crucial time lag inherent in traditional logistics. The frontline units received their reinforcements and supplies with unprecedented speed, bypassing the perilous, congested bridgeheads that had been the Achilles heel of so many previous campaigns. As the DUKWs churned relentlessly across the Rhine's dark waters, an even more audacious maneuver unfolded in the skies above. This was Operation Varsity, the largest single-lift airborne operation in military history. On March 24, 1945, just hours after the initial river crossings began, over 16,000 paratroopers and glider-borne infantry from the British 6th and U.S. 17th Airborne Divisions descended behind German lines. Their mission was precise: to drop directly into the Wesel and Hamminkeln area, securing vital river crossings, disrupting German artillery positions, and establishing a deep second front to link up with the advancing river assault forces. This was no mere coincidence, but a meticulously planned, synchronized hammer blow designed to overwhelm the already reeling German defenders. The sound of thousands of engines and the sight of parachutes filling the dawn sky was a psychological shockwave. For German commanders, already bewildered by the amphibious swimming trucks, the sudden appearance of Allied troops, seemingly from nowhere, completed their disorientation. They found themselves caught in a deadly vice, attacked from the front by the relentless riverborne infantry, and from the rear by paratroopers who immediately began disrupting their command control and vital supply lines. This multi-pronged assault effectively encircled many German units, preventing any coherent counterattack or reinforcement. Yet, Operation Varsity was not without its brutal costs. German anti-aircraft fire remained intense, and pockets of determined resistance still fought fiercely, especially against the vulnerable glider landings, leading to significant Allied casualties in the air phase. Despite these losses, the strategic objective was achieved. The airborne units rapidly secured their objectives and within hours began linking with the leading elements of the river-crossing forces, spearheaded by the DUKW's logistical prowess. This combined assault from river and sky shattered any lingering German illusions of a coherent defense on the Rhine's eastern bank. The river, once a formidable barrier, was now merely a conduit for an unstoppable advance, flanked by an enemy that had literally fallen from the sky. The immediate aftermath of the initial crossings presented Allied command with a monumental logistical challenge. Securing a bridgehead was one thing. Sustaining a rapid advance deep into German territory required a constant, uninterrupted flow of every conceivable supply. This is where the DUKW truly forged its legendary status. From the western bank of the Rhine, a continuous stream of these six-wheeled amphibians now plied the river. They delivered millions of rounds of ammunition, gallons of fuel, tons of rations, and critical engineering equipment directly to the forward combat units on the eastern bank. Imagine entire platoons of infantry arriving with their full complement of gear, and then their vehicles immediately transitioning to ferry duties without a single moment of delay. This capability established an unprecedented DUKW highway. It eliminated the traditional vulnerable bottlenecks of bridge building or ferry operations, where supplies had to be unloaded, then reloaded, often under enemy fire. Instead, a DUKW carrying shells for a 105mm artillery piece could drive from a supply depot miles behind the front directly to the gun emplacement on the opposite bank. On its return journey, it would often carry critically wounded soldiers, rushing them to field hospitals. A seamless bidirectional lifeline that fundamentally altered the operational tempo. The impact on the Allied advance was profound. Units were resupplied almost as quickly as they consumed material. Casualty evacuation became significantly faster, improving survival rates and maintaining troop morale. This direct delivery system meant less exposure for logistics personnel, fewer transfer points to guard, and a vastly accelerated push through the heart of Germany. General Omar Bradley later observed that the DUKW was as important as the landing craft in the Normandy invasion for its role in enabling the swift exploitation of the Rhine crossing. Yet, for all its revolutionary efficiency, the DUKW was not invulnerable. Its relatively light armor and open-top design made it susceptible to direct artillery fire or determined infantry ambush, particularly during riverine transit. Maintenance, too, presented its own challenges, with thousands of these specialized vehicles operating continuously under arduous conditions. Despite these limitations, its operational utility far outweighed its drawbacks, solidifying its place as a pivotal component of the Allied logistical triumph. The Rhine crossing, that pivotal moment of March 1945, revealed a stark industrial asymmetry. It was a battlefield manifestation of two fundamentally divergent philosophies of war production. On one side, the Allied capacity for sheer, unyielding quantity. On the other, Germany's deep-rooted dedication to qualitative craftsmanship. The American approach, epitomized by the DUKW, was one of pragmatic utilitarianism. It was a vehicle designed for function, not elegance, built to be mass-produced with astonishing speed and efficiency. General Motors Corporation, leveraging its immense industrial base, had conceived and delivered 21,147 DUKWs by war's end. This staggering output allowed for standardized components, simplified maintenance, and the logistical flexibility to absorb losses and deploy these amphibious trucks across every theater. Germany, in stark contrast, pursued a doctrine of qualitative superiority, often prioritizing advanced engineering and meticulous, almost artisanal construction. Their equivalent, the Landwasserschlepper, or LWS, was a technologically impressive machine. Developed by Rheinmetall Borsig in the late 1930s, this tracked amphibious tractor was powerful, robust, and capable of towing considerable loads. Yet its complexity, its resource-intensive manufacturing process, meant that barely 100 were ever produced across its various iterations. This disparity was more than a mere difference in numbers. It was a strategic chasm. The DUKW, a ubiquitous workhorse, allowed Allied commanders to envision and execute river crossings on a scale previously unthinkable. They could afford to lose DUKWs, could deploy them in overwhelming waves, ensuring an uninterrupted flow of supplies and rapid force projection. Germany, meanwhile, found its few, precious LWS units relegated to specialized, often static roles, unable to influence the vast tactical landscape that was unfolding. While the LWS certainly showcased German ingenuity, a testament to their engineering prowess, its limited deployment underscored a critical flaw in their overall war strategy. The relentless Allied bombing campaigns, the chronic shortages of raw materials, and a strategic focus on complex, bespoke designs ultimately prevented Germany from developing the industrial resilience required for total war. The DUKW's numerical dominance therefore became not just a tactical advantage, but a profound, systemic statement on the nature of 20th century conflict. The sheer audacity of the DUK's assault across the Rhine delivered a catastrophic psychological blow to the German defenders. Their centuries-old doctrine that a river of such magnitude could only be crossed at prepared points or by painstakingly constructed bridges lay shattered. Soldiers, positioned in formidable bunkers along the West Bank, watched in disbelief as what they assumed were trucks simply drove into the water, only to re-emerge on their side. This immediate systemic shock permeated every level of the Wehrmacht. Field Marshal Walter Model, commander of Army Group B, a seasoned officer known for his defensive prowess, found his entire strategic calculus rendered obsolete. His reports to the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, or OKW, conveyed a growing sense of futility. The river, once our steadfast shield, he observed, is now but a highway for the enemy's motorized infantry. The Duck's ability to create a dispersed, unassailable crossing bypassed his concentrated strongpoints, making traditional river defense irrelevant. Even Joseph Goebbels, the regime's master propagandist, who had long spun tales of the Rhine's invincibility as Germany's natural bastion, faced an undeniable reality. His public pronouncements, once brimming with defiant rhetoric, grew increasingly hollow as reports of mass surrenders and the swift Allied advance poured in. The image of the Rhine as an impassable barrier, carefully cultivated for years, collapsed under the weight of thousands of amphibious vehicles, rendering his narrative utterly bankrupt. This strategic and ideological dismantling cascaded down to the common soldier. Witnessing the Ducks driving ashore, unimpeded, and then unloading supplies directly to the front lines, bypassed their defensive fire zones and broke their will to resist. The feeling of being outmaneuvered by an industrially superior, pragmatic foe led to a rapid and widespread breakdown of morale. Entire companies, even battalions, began laying down their arms, seeing no logical path to continued resistance against an enemy that defied all conventional understanding of riverine warfare. However, it is crucial to note the Duck was not solely responsible for the psychological collapse. German forces were already severely depleted by years of brutal fighting on multiple fronts, particularly in the east. Allied air superiority, relentless bombing campaigns, and the strategic encirclement tactics employed by Eisenhower's forces also played significant roles. The Duck, rather, served as a potent accelerant, a visible, undeniable symbol of the Allied industrial might and tactical ingenuity that finally shattered an already fragile German morale structure. This strategic and ideological dismantling cascaded down to the common soldier. Witnessing the Ducks driving ashore, unimpeded, and then unloading supplies directly to the front lines, bypassed their defensive fire zones and broke their will to resist. The feeling of being outmaneuvered by an industrially superior, pragmatic foe led to a rapid and widespread breakdown of morale. Entire companies, even battalions, began laying down their arms, seeing no logical path to continued resistance against an enemy that defied all conventional understanding of riverine warfare. However, it is crucial to note the Duck was not solely responsible for the psychological collapse. German forces were already severely depleted by years of brutal fighting on multiple fronts, particularly in the east. Allied air superiority, relentless bombing campaigns, and the strategic encirclement tactics employed by Eisenhower's forces also played significant roles. The Duck, rather, served as a potent accelerant, a visible, undeniable symbol of the Allied industrial might and tactical ingenuity that finally shattered an already fragile German morale structure. By March 25, 1945, barely 48 hours after the initial DUKW spearheads had pierced the Rhine's formidable defenses, Winston Churchill, Britain's Prime Minister, arrived on the river's western bank. This was no mere inspection tour. It was a profound, calculated act of symbolism, a direct challenge to the very notion of German impregnability. Accompanied by Field Marshal Montgomery, Churchill embarked on a small DUKW, one of the very amphibious trucks that had, just days prior, seemed an impossible anomaly to German intelligence. The vehicle, designed for the brutal pragmatism of logistics, now carried the weight of Allied triumph. Gliding across the Rhine's waters, then driving directly onto the eastern bank near Wesel. He stood on conquered German soil, observing the relentless flow of supplies and men still pouring across the river, ferried by thousands of these unsung workhorses. Yet, even in this moment of grand declaration, the war's harsh realities lingered. Though the immediate area was secured, German artillery still intermittently shelled the crossing points. Churchill's personal crossing, a gesture of audacious confidence, was not entirely without risk. A stark reminder that even as victory neared, the enemy, though broken, remained dangerous. It underscored the difference between a symbolic act and the continuous, gritty effort of securing a front. This crossing, a simple journey rendered monumental by context, served as an unmistakable declaration. The Rhine, for 2 millennia Germany's strategic bulwark, was now, thanks to the DUKW's industrial might, an Allied highway. Churchill's presence, physically transcending this once impenetrable barrier, cemented the psychological capitulation of a German high command that had placed its final hopes upon a river, now, industrially and symbolically, obsolete. The DUKW's operational efficiency did more than merely shock the Wehrmacht. It became a decisive accelerant, propelling the Allied advance at a pace few had imagined possible. Post-war analyses from military historians and strategic planners suggest this unprecedented logistical bypass shortened the European conflict by approximately 3 weeks. Each day saved meant a quantifiable reduction in human cost, preventing further Allied casualties, averting additional loss of German civilian life. The sustained flow of ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies, ferried directly from the west bank of the Rhine to units fighting on the east, eliminated what would have been critical bottlenecks. Conventional bridge building, slow and vulnerable to counterattack, would have imposed significant delays. Instead, the DUKW created an immediate mobile supply chain, allowing the spearheads of Montgomery's 21st Army Group and Simpson's 9th Army to maintain their high operational tempo, driving deep into the German heartland without pause. This rapid penetration prevented the establishment of new cohesive German defensive lines, undermining any prospect of prolonged resistance. The scale of this logistical feat was staggering. Thousands of tons of material and hundreds of thousands of troops were moved across the Rhine in the initial days following the crossing. This continuous resupply directly supported the swift envelopment of the Ruhr industrial region, Germany's last major economic engine, and facilitated the race towards the Elbe. Cities that might have faced prolonged siege warfare or devastating aerial bombardment in a protracted conflict were spared further destruction, as the rapid Allied advance rendered their defense militarily irrelevant. Yet, to attribute the expedited conclusion solely to the DUKW would be an oversimplification. The German military was already in disarray, its strategic reserves depleted, and Allied air supremacy was absolute. The relentless push of the Red Army from the east, simultaneously collapsing the Eastern Front, was also a critical converging factor. However, the DUKW's unique capacity prevented the Rhine from becoming a protracted, costly siege, a logistical quagmire that could have added weeks of bitter fighting and countless additional casualties on what was to be the final battlefield. The DUKW's profound impact, far from fading with the final shots of World War II, reverberated through subsequent military doctrine, fundamentally reshaping perceptions of amphibious logistics and operational reach. Its wartime success, a stark demonstration of industrial pragmatism, directly informed the strategic blueprints of the nascent Cold War. NATO, in particular, integrated the lessons learned from the Rhine crossings into its core planning for European defense. The emphasis shifted from static defensive lines to highly mobile, adaptable forces capable of rapid redeployment and sustained supply across varied terrain, including inland waterways. The DUK was concept of immediate shore-to-inland transport, bypassing vulnerable port infrastructure, became a cornerstone for developing subsequent generations of amphibious vehicles, ensuring a continuous logistical chain from ship to frontline. Even the Soviet Union, keen observers of Allied wartime innovations, recognized the DUK was revolutionary potential. Their own post-war military development saw the rapid introduction of indigenous amphibious trucks, such as the BAV-485 and GAZ-46, which bore striking resemblances to the American DUK. This direct emulation underscored a critical lesson, that logistics, when fluid and unhindered, could dictate the pace and success of an entire campaign, a principle the Red Army had learned perhaps most painfully during its own vast Eastern Front operations.
Beyond its tactical applications, the DUKW served as a powerful testament to a distinct American industrial philosophy. It was not a weapon of exquisite precision or overwhelming firepower, but rather an embodiment of quantity, pragmatism, and standardization. The production of 21,147 DUKWs, simple, robust, and easily maintained, starkly contrasted with Germany's more complex, often over-engineered designs, which struggled with mass production and field repair. This commitment to practical, scalable solutions became a defining characteristic of American military industrial output, influencing everything from Jeep production to aircraft manufacturing for decades to come. Despite its revolutionary impact, the DUKW was not without its limitations. Its unarmored hull made it vulnerable to direct fire, and its relatively slow speed across both land and water meant it was best employed in secured or semi-secured environments. The DUK was fundamentally a wartime expedient, a brilliant adaptation of existing truck technology, rather than a purpose-built, highly protected combat vehicle. Its legacy, therefore, lies not in its ultimate perfection, but in its profound influence on the concept of amphibious logistics and the subsequent evolution of specialized assault craft designed to overcome these very vulnerabilities.
Thus, the DUKW, the ungainly DUK, did more than just swim across rivers. It forged a new path for military doctrine, proving that industrial capacity, when coupled with pragmatic innovation, could redefine the very nature of warfare. It left an indelible mark on how nations planned, equipped, and fought, heralding an era where logistical flexibility became as crucial as firepower itself.
The DUK, often derided for its ungainly appearance, a true ugly duckling of the Allied war machine, ultimately emerged as a potent symbol. It was a testament to American industrial might, the sheer capacity to mass produce an effective solution and adapt it for immediate tactical needs. This humble amphibious truck, built by GMC in 1942, was far more than just a vehicle. It embodied a strategic philosophy. For 2 millennia, the Rhine had stood, a formidable natural barrier. German doctrine, rooted in centuries of military thought, viewed its breadth and current as an impenetrable defense, conquerable only at fixed, heavily fortified bridgeheads. Yet, the DUK, with its ability to drive directly onto the river, traverse its waters, and then climb onto the opposite bank, stripped it of that status. It rendered the Rhine and much of Germany's river defense strategy industrially obsolete. The DUK didn't just cross rivers, it redefined river crossings. It shifted the paradigm from costly, concentrated bridge-building operations to widespread, distributed amphibious assaults. This flexible approach, demonstrated vividly by the 21,147 units produced and deployed across the European theater, paved the way for modern logistical concepts, where sustained supply chains could extend directly to the forward edge of the battle area. However, the DUK was never a marvel of engineering elegance. Its design, crude, its armor minimal. It was slow, cumbersome on land, and vulnerable to heavy artillery fire.
Its success stemmed not from individual combat prowess, but from its sheer numbers and the tactical ingenuity of Allied commanders who understood its unique utility. It was a triumph of pragmatic utility over sleek, specialized design. This unassuming vehicle, this amphibious truck, truly carried the future of warfare on its sturdy chassis. It demonstrated that logistics and adaptability were paramount in the crucible of modern conflict. The Duck's legacy stretched far beyond the Rhine, influencing Cold War doctrine, NATO's amphibious capabilities, and even Soviet military development. It underscored a lasting truth, that sometimes the most decisive weapon is not a tank or a fighter jet, but a simple, mass-produced machine that changes the rules of engagement for good.